Welcome back to Starto, the show for the American entrepreneur. Today's guest is the author of Beyond the Obvious, Phil McKinney. Phil, thanks for being here.
Oh man, great to stop by.
Talk to us first about, you're kind of considered the guru of innovation. So I'm a guy who's out in the world and I've got a day job and I have this one idea. What steps do I need to take to start translating that idea in innovation?
Well, the steps that I would recommend is you break it down into 4 elements. One is what I call the market validation. Validate the problem exists. Second phase, customer validation. Hook by crook, do a flash video, whatever. Fake up something that you can now go back to that customer and say, remember we talked about it, we validated this was the problem. Here's what we're working on that we think could be a possible solution, and get the feedback. And that's what you iterate before you actually go off and actually build something or do anything. And then the third phase is get in the market, do a limited launch. Maybe that's friends and family, or maybe it's just your buddies at the local bar, or whatever. And then get into, okay, now ramp this thing up and launch it.
Well, so much of the time I see really bright engineers and really bright entrepreneurs that go out and start building something.
They go they start coding day one.
Absolutely, and it's beautiful. It's a great product. I mean, they've got incredible UI, they've got incredible features, and it turns out nobody actually, they're solving a problem that doesn't exist in the world.
It's the biggest issue where entrepreneurs think of themselves, I've got this problem, so therefore there must be millions of people like me. No, you're unique. You are not a representative of that customer, so you have to get that validation.
I read something recently about a company that has an amazing product and a very successful startup, and they cannot keep employees because their product's amazing and their culture is awful.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, they've been able to innovate on one aspect, but they left that other aspect of their own culture and their own people development kind of off to the side.
Well, now you're hitting a passion point for me on culture. Most organizations don't put any thought process into the culture. They just let the culture emerge.
Whatever happens, happens.
Right. But what you find, though, is culture eats strategy for lunch. It doesn't matter what the CEO dictates as the strategy. If it doesn't align with the culture will reject that strategy. Some executive makes a decision and says, we're going to go this direction. And if it's counter to the culture just kind of goes into a slow roll. Nothing happens. The organization's slow to change. And particularly if you have no culture, then your ability to muster the organization to go attack a problem or to innovate is non-existent. It all comes from a command and control model. And in today's creative economy, command and control does not work. We need to think of different management structures to support the ability of creating cultures and teams that drive this high level of innovation.
I think about all the really cool startups I know, and all of them have this palpable sense when you walk in the office. You could feel it. Mm-hmm. There's kind of a sense of electricity. Is that what we're talking about with culture?
Well, it's more than that. I mean, people come, to startups and that because of one, they're passionate about maybe the space, or it's using some cool technology that people are interested in, or they're coming back with a team that they were really close with someplace else, so they want to re-experience something that happened in a previous life. Here's kind of our mission and objectives as an organization, and here's the things that we hold near and dear. Teamwork, transparency, ethics, and these are kind of the clear lines that we don't cross. You need to be able to communicate that effectively to every person in the organization, because what they're going to do is culture what allows people to make decisions and not make decisions. We see it now on the front page of the Wall Street Journal with these companies where CEOs are getting, arrested for crimes or whatever, right? If an organization, had a clear guideline on a zero tolerance for certain actions, the employees understand that. They know that's the rule. If you cross the line, no matter who you are, you're going to get nailed for it. At the same time, if you're family oriented, put your policies in place for that support that. Define what it is. Why do you exist? Not to make money. Go beyond that. Why do you exist? Then how do you communicate that to everybody that you hire? How do you instill in them the same passion you as a founder have?
I'm a startup and I've gone through and I've gotten some great insights. I've figured out, I've gone through the steps. I've actually built something and I get it out into the marketplace. And I am okay, but I'm not setting the world on fire. What questions would you recommend that we start to ask ourselves as entrepreneurs when we're not, I kind of call it zombie land. You're not quite dead, like you haven't failed, but you're not fully successful. You haven't reached the goal.
Well, I think the point is don't stop innovating. The biggest problem people have is they focus on one innovation, be a product. They kind of get it out the door and they're going to go, oh, now I can finally relax.
Yeah.
I can finally take that 1 week's vacation with my spouse or whatever. No.
Sorry, you don't get a vacation.
You don't get a vacation.
Yeah.
It is a constant daily push. So if you've innovated and you think you have the best product, look at all the other areas that you could be innovating. Innovation is about being noticed. If you're caught in the noise because you're the 5th, restaurant advisory application or the 25th, geo check-in app, how do you stand out? And the problem is we've all been taught through school conformity, right? Think about your school years. You all want to look the same, you want to act the same, don't stand out, because if you stand out, you get picked on, right? But as soon as you become an entrepreneur and as soon as you become an innovator, getting stuck in the crowd is death.
Got just a few minutes left, but a couple of things I want to talk about. You talked, I believe it was in one of your podcasts, about the, 14 steps of a company, fertilization, trigger event, the decision to start a business. The next one is the one, find a mentor. What does that mean? Because it's difficult in a lot of settings around the country where there's not a ton of people out there in the innovation space. How does one go about trying to find a mentor? And once you find that, how should you utilize that person?
Well, I'm a big believer in mentorship, whether it's mentorship and innovation or just general business mentorship. I was the beneficiary of a phenomenal mentor earlier in my career. A guy by the name of Bob Davis, who's now retired, lives in Phoenix. And I give him a lot of credit for the success I've had. In fact, when I had a conversation with Bob years ago about how do I pay it back, his point was you can't pay it back. You have to pay it forward. So he tasked me with mentoring others as I got successful in my career. But be careful. It isn't just about finding someone who's famous or who's known in a specific area. The key is do they have expertise that they can provide you a unique perspective? Are you truly going to treat them as a mentor? Meaning, are you going to listen? You need to be comfortable enough to where you tell them everything, because they need to see that full picture in order to advise you, personal life, professional life. But it has to be a match. Just because someone is older doesn't mean they're always smarter.
Sure.
Right? So you need to find somebody that you mesh with and you have a good relationship with. And you have to have a mentor that is going to be willing to commit the time. There's a lot of people say, yeah, I'll mentor and it's 1 hour a quarter. That's not mentoring. Mentoring is a long-term relationship.
So how can people find the book?
Beyond the Obvious, it's out in hardcover in all the major bookstores. It's also available digital on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and on iTunes. And there's the audiobook.
And I've got to highly recommend, just a personal thing, I love your podcast. You do a podcast once a week?
Once a week, Killer Innovations. It's now just March 22nd was the 7-year anniversary for the podcast, and the entire back catalog is available.
We were talking just before the show. You podcast, not just before podcasting was cool, before there was iTunes.
Yeah, I started podcasting before the iTunes support came around.
That's amazing.
Back in the early days, when you had to hand build all your tools and everything to make podcasts happen.
And how can people get in touch?
My website's philmckinney.com, and all the information is there.
Awesome. Phil, thanks so much for your time. We really appreciate you coming by.
Thanks, man.
Awesome. That was great, man. So, startup friends, I have a request. Take 30 seconds out of your day and go to Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn or Foursquare, whichever social networking site you prefer, and tell the world about the amazing work that Startup America Partnership is doing. And hey, while you're there, why not go ahead and give Starto TV some love by following us on Twitter at @StartoTV or on Facebook at facebook.com/StartoTV.